Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Exchange, the podcast where leading scientists and industry professionals meet over a few drinks to discuss the latest ideas and trends in dairy nutrition. Tonight, we've assembled a panel of folks to talk about, to take a forensic look at chelated minerals. But before we get started, I need to provide a disclaimer, right? 3 of the 4 panelists we've got on the screen tonight are Balchem employees. And if there's one thing that I've learned on my many, many years on this molten rock circling the sun is that people have biases, right? You know it. I know it. We deal with it every day. But I've talked to my colleagues, and we're going to do our level best to check our biases and agendas at the door. And why are we doing that? Because you guys didn't come here for a commercial, right? You came here for real science, and that's why you keep coming back. And so we're gonna stick to that. Now, with that said, I am going to give a little commercial here up front, and I'm going to ask Stephen Ashmead to help me do that. Now, Stephen was our featured speaker for a webinar that we did just a couple days ago, actually. And it was titled Taking a Forensic Look at Chelated Minerals. Now, Stephen, most people don't know about Balchem being a trace mineral company, but nothing could really be further from the truth. We're actually the original, as I understand it, and I think you can tell us a little bit about that. Would you mind kind of giving us a history lesson with about your grandfather, Harvey Ashmead, and how did he get started in the chelated mineral business?
Sure. So my grandfather started Albion Laboratories in 1956. At the time, it was in Ogden, Utah, and it was near the Intermountain Stockyards associated with Union Pacific Railroad. And he was a pharmacist by training, and his business model at that time was to sell common veterinary pharmaceuticals wholesale to the farmer. And was successful at that, but he then got interested in some of the feeds, particularly some of the premixes, and how some of the minerals in the premixes didn't seem to be absorbed very well. Ended up basically still in the manure at the end. So he started investigating into that, and he worked with the concept of chelation, trying to mimic what was actually the mineral form within the foodstuffs, and developed a line of minerals and started going into chelated minerals for animals, for the premixes. And that's where Albion started their venture into organic trace minerals, and expanded from there to human nutrition, dietary ingredients, and from there also into plant nutrition, dietary ingredients. So it covered kind of all three business models as well. And so that's kind of how it started. And then when my grandfather passed away, my dad took over the business. And then in 2016, Balchem acquired the Albion business. So they acquired the originality of it. So.
All right, very well. Thank you for that, Stephen. Now, tell us a little bit about Albion Mineral. I think you do the formulation for both the animal nutrition products as well as the human nutrition products. So tell us about your involvement with human nutrition, and tell us a little bit about the Albion's business there.
So Albion creates the Albion minerals on the human nutrition side are bisglycinate chelates. They're created as dietary supplement ingredients. So they market the 50-pound or 25 kilo or 20 kilo sacks that then get further incorporated into the gummies, the pills, the capsules, things of that nature, or even into food fortification products. So they get fortified, particularly outside the United States. There's customers who fortify milk and pasta and flour and sugar and so on like that, but provide chelated minerals for that. So those were originally set up to be very high purity, high potency products, much more so than what was typically available at that time.
Yeah. I might add as well is that Albion is the world's largest manufacturer of chelated minerals for human nutrition. I actually take some myself. I take their magnesium. One thing I learned during your introduction for the webinar is that you've got a passion for expertise related to magnesium. Uh,
Yeah.
so tell us a bit about that.
So magnesium is an interesting mineral. It's fairly ubiquitous. It's one of those things that, at least in human nutrition, is very, very hard to diagnose. There's probably some subclinical deficiencies that we're walking around with, but it's hard to diagnose. Magnesium is usually co-located with calcium. So you use calcium for contraction of your muscles. You use magnesium to relax the muscles. So it's essential there. It's also the only divalent cation that you can lose in your sweat. So if a lot of perspiration, particularly in hot, humid environments under exertion, you're going to be losing magnesium in your sweat. So it's definitely an interesting mineral.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Stephen. Stephen, we do have a pub theme here. Would you mind sharing with us your drink of choice?
So I don't drink alcohol, but my vice is the Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew, yeah. Yeah, and as I said on the pre-show, I think my alcohol is healthier than your Mountain Dew. So just saying.
Third ingredient is orange juice. So
Yeah.
mine has fruit juice in it. So
All
I'm good.
All right, very well. We have another distinguished guest with us, Dr. Bill Weiss. Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a retired professor from The Ohio State University. I worked there for about 40 years, a lot of work in minerals and vitamins. So this is an area I'm quite familiar with.
Yeah,
so
we thought
forward to the discussion.
Yeah, we thought you'd be a great guest. In fact, during the webinar, we invoked your name a couple times. You probably heard that. So maybe we'll follow up on some of those questions. Bill, why don't you tell us what's in your glass tonight?
Well, it's a Raleigh Drum Lemon Shanty from Great Lakes Brewing Company.
Okay.
So if you like shanties, it's as lemony as it gets.
Okay. I love shanties, but I don't get the Great Lakes up here very often.
It's very refreshing. It'll probably be the last shanty of the season.
All right. Good deal. All right. And got a special co-host tonight. We got Dr. Maria Spindola. Maria, you are brand new to Balchem. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Maria Spindola. I graduated in veterinary medicine in University of São Paulo, and I also earned my PhD from the same university, always focusing on livestock. And even though my background is very health oriented, I have been working for the nutrition area for almost 15 years. And I'm just joined Balchem this year to lead the mineral for our animal division. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm hoping to learn a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you, Maria, for joining us and looking forward to the conversation and your contribution to it. Myself tonight, I've selected a Baker's Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, 107 proof, Todd Kranz from Select Sires. He recommended this. This was bottled in December of 2016 and was in the barrel for 7 years and 3 months. So, it's Todd. You did a nice job, buddy. This is a good one. I'm going to keep this one on the list. Stephen, why don't we jump in right now? Give us kind of the 30,000-foot overview of the presentation that you gave a couple days ago, and what are some of the key takeaways that we need to talk about during this podcast?
Welcome to the next generation in chelated minerals. Introducing new Keysure Plus amino acid chelated minerals from Balchem. Keysure Plus delivers a higher concentration of mineral with a superior amino acid profile. The higher mineral content adds formulation flexibility, opening up space in the ration, and also reduces the carbon footprint. The superior amino acid profile delivers 28% protein from microbial biomass and reduces the amount of supplemental lysine needed in the ration. The Keysure Plus line also offers a granulated form for improved handling characteristics and reduced dust. Visit Balchem.com to see how new Keysure Plus can deliver the added benefits you need to improve performance and reduce manufacturing hurdles.
So, chelated minerals are really a chemical reaction between some sort of organic ligand, typically amino acids are what we use, and metals, and they form a ring-like structure that really helps protect the mineral from antagonists, which results in greater bioavailability, because those antagonists can effectively remove minerals from the diet. And the minerals are still there, but they're just not available. So when you start looking at from that standpoint, it's a chemical reaction. You can formulate and create these chelates and make sure that they're properly chelated. And one of the biggest things that I see when I look at products is just knowing the molar ratios, just knowing that you have the same number of molecules of amino acids you do for metals, and then you just make sure that they're joined up through your chemical process. So 30,000 foot, if you've got properly chelated, you can have a good product that will help with the antagonists that are going to be in the diet and in the water.
So you mentioned antagonists. Is that the primary mode of action for chelated minerals, and the reason for feeding them is because there are antagonists in the feed? Are there any other indications for chelated minerals?
So chelated minerals, in my view, are organic trace minerals are more bioavailable as a general rule than inorganics. And I really think that because there are antagonists in the diet, and that it's not exclusive to animals. We as fellow human beings, we eat a lot of antagonists and drink a lot of antagonists in our diet as well. So it's not exclusive. It's just there. Our bodies are pretty good. Animals' bodies are pretty good as a whole, trying to extract those minerals out. But having them pre-chelated certainly helps out. It's really trying to mimic what the food does versus adding some inorganics to the diet.
So do chelated minerals, does that help with the active transport across the cell membrane at all?
So there is theory that, it does, but maybe, Bill, you know of some studies. I'm not aware of any studies that directly have measured that transport of the chelated minerals across. We usually look at functionality of bioavailability in terms of serum values or other functionalities in there, but I'm not aware of any in vivo or in vitro studies of stuff moving across. Maybe you know of some.
Yeah, there's been in vivo. There's not. It's so hard to do.
Yeah,
but there is cell culture work with different organic minerals, and they're absorbed differently than the free metals. There are at least some of them are absorbed differently in these cell culture things. Some of them obviously will be dissociated and go through the standard metal transporters, but there's evidence that some of it is transported into the enterocyte differently than the standard inorganics.
yeah,
which may be one of the reasons for better bioavailability. You're now got two potential absorption sites instead of just the one.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I was just going to say, some of the papers I've seen maybe suggest that might be through the essential amino acid pathway, particularly if your metal is joined up to an essential amino acid.
I guess I think there's more. If you'd asked me this question 15 years ago, I'd have said the big difference is absorption. It's more absorbable. But I think a lot of the new data says there's a lot of stuff, or the source of these metals have a lot of effect on the bacteria within the rumen and the intestine, which has marked effects on the animal, this microbiome stuff. And I think a substantial effect of these organic trace minerals is within the intestine. They're going to have some effects even if they aren't absorbed differently than the sulfates or the chlorides. There's at least 2 or 3 papers looking at the microbiome in cattle, and they're different. If you feed zinc sulfate or organic zinc or hydroxy zinc, they're different. They change the bacteria, and that can have a huge effect on immune function. Huge effect. So I think it's much bigger than just absorption. I think there's many more effects that we're just now starting to think about.
Well, Bill, can you kind of expound on that? I think, a conversation you and I had the other day was related to sulfates and the maybe some issues that they may be causing in the rumen.
Yeah. Again, as a metal source, the sulfates in most cases are pretty good. I mean, that's the reason we supplement trace minerals, because all the research, 50 years ago showed that supplementing sulfates does some good. But again, we learn stuff, and I used to be, I said sulfates are fine, or maybe a mix of organics and sulfates. But as we learn about some of the negative effects of sulfates in the rumen, these metals are toxic to bacteria. Copper and zinc are toxic, manganese to a lesser extent, but they're toxic, and we depend on bacteria to digest fiber. And there's been, with the hydroxys, less data with organics, but when you compare the sulfates to hydroxys or sulfates to organics and look at fiber digestibility, very often it's higher with the non-sulfate sources. And I can't prove this, but I don't think it's because the non-sulfates stimulate. I think it's the sulfates inhibit. And a few points of fiber digestion can buy an awful lot of mineral. It's huge. The effect on the potential effect on energy, to me, is as big as the effects of the better absorption of the mineral. It's huge.
Maria, you're a very nice young lady. You're not interrupting, but you got to learn that that I tend to take over, so you got to elbow your way in. So what kind of questions do you have?
Yeah, no, thank you. I was wondering about all this interaction between the antagonists, right? And what Dr. Bill said about something that can be cheap. So we are supplementing a lot, right? So this is something that I always tell to my husband: don't eat too much salt, because it's not because the salt is cheap that you're going to make health, going to make you more healthier, right? So I think it's the way, as we think on inorganic minerals, we need to think about excess of minerals, not necessarily because they are cheap, they are not interacting in a negative way with other nutrients, right? So we do have some old studies, but very nice studies on the literature that shows the bad interaction or the antagonism effect on vitamins. I don't know, Bill, do you have any experience with that? We really saw that inorganic minerals can decrease the stability of important vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin E, whereas when we are using organic minerals, we don't have this interaction. So do you have any data to share with us about the vitamin lower degradation using organic minerals?
It's probably not a major problem in TMRs because everything's so dilute. But in premixes or in concentrate mixes or inorganic sulfates, especially vitamin A, vitamin E to a lesser extent, but especially vitamin A, it increases the degradation of, or the loss of potency of vitamin A, supplemental vitamin A. Again, especially in premixes and concentrate mixes. So the organics basically are inert with respect to vitamin breakdown. So that's another benefit.
Can you expound on the relationship of time, Bill? I mean, how long does it take for it to attenuate the vitamins?
It's if you look, and it's so dependent on how the vitamin is stored. Vitamins are rather labile, so if they're stored under farm conditions with big temperature changes, high humidity, maybe sun exposure, that's going to make it much quicker. The degradation, again, vitamin A is the by far the most sensitive, and there's studies showing us 10 to 15% reduction in potency per month in vitamin A in these mixes. And that would be increased. And these are under not ideal conditions, but under more farm conditions. So it's not a small drop. You lose 10 or 15% a month. That's a lot.
And it can be very costly, right? It's not about only the health, but it is very costly.
Yeah. And, if you're assuming you're trying to formulate for 100,000 units and a month later you only got 90,000 units or 80,000 units, that can lead to some issues down the road.
Yeah. Like Bill said, it's really a three-legged stool that affects it. It's going to be temperature, humidity, time, and UV exposure as well.
Yeah. Stephen, I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of nutritionists, and I can tell you for a fact that there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace related to different chelated mineral technologies, right? There just are. And you kind of touched on that during your presentation. You've got your proteinase, you got your complexes, you've got amino acid chelates, you've got ones that are bound to sugars. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between some of those chemically and maybe even performance-wise?
So, yeah, there is a lot of confusion. So part of it has to do with there's so many definitions within AFCO. You've got.
Sorry to interrupt, Stephen. Yeah. But on that, the different definitions in AFCO, a lot of that's gamesmanship, right? By the companies that put those together, and
there is some, yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that. I mean, maybe people don't even understand that. I find it intriguing.
So companies can ask for a definition that will cover their product. It takes some time and some again, trying to remove the biases, some political maneuvering to get something approved. But those definitions are what the regulators, particularly in the U.S. and Canada, rely on in terms of how to classify a product. So when you look at those AFCO definitions, you've got a whole bunch of them there. Some of them are specific to a particular company, such as the methionine hydroxide analogs. Others are more general, like the metal proteinates. There's a lot of companies who operate underneath that. But when you start looking at, I still think that those AFCO definitions are useful in terms of identifying what should be expected. So if you've got a definition that says it has to be a chelate, you should be able to find some, or those products should have some of those characteristics of being a chelate. Complexes it's an interesting relationship between a chelate and a complex. And the one the example that I used in the webinar, and I'll use here, is kind of geometry, where a rectangle is defined as basically being a four-sided object, each side parallel to each other with right angles at the corners. A square is also a rectangle, but it's a special form of a rectangle. So using kind of that same analogy, chelates are really complexes from a chemical definition, but there's special forms of those complexes, and that special form is related to the formation of that ring structure, which in my opinion provides that protection versus having a complex where there might not be that ring structure, so that this doesn't have as good a stability for the mineral. So it doesn't, with it being opened out there, I think it's a little easier for other things in the diet to strip that metal off versus when it's in a ring structure.
And then do you see, or is there any evidence that there's different performances between the different types?
So in biological systems, and I'm sure, Bill, you experienced this too, Murphy rules quite a bit in biological research. So sometimes you can see differences, and they're a little more apparent. I think you see them a little bit more apparent in vitro systems where you can control some some of the conditions than say out and doing farm research or field research. But yeah, I think there are some differences, particularly when you start stressing systems. I've seen some papers where, particularly some in vitro systems, where they've stressed systems and looking at differences between chelates and complexes. And complexes will respond to the stress, but the chelates respond better to that stress in terms of still delivering some mineral payload. But you can still cover those, uncover those in biological research or field research, but sometimes Murphy rules, and you don't get to see the differences that you're looking for.
I just say trace mineral and vitamin research is the hardest thing about that is what do you measure?
Yes.
If I'm doing a protein study, I'm going to measure milk protein outfit. It's sensitive, but with trace minerals, what do you measure?
Yeah.
If you're not, it may have a production response, but you're going to need hundreds of cows because the production response is likely healthier cows, and it's going to take a lot of cows to see that.
Sure.
So a lot of it is, you take in vitro or you take some blood measurements or liver measurements, and you have to do a lot of extrapolation. Or like Steve was saying, stress the system, and that research gets expensive. So
yes.
there's always going to be a lot of confusion in this area because we just are never, I shouldn't say never, but it's unlikely we're ever going to get real definitive data. They say we do this test and A is better than B, but
right.
We just aren't going to have that.
Same issue in human nutrition. I mean, going back to the magnesium,
Yeah.
Blood magnesium, just not a responsive thing to magnesium intake. You want a magnesium, the gold standard is 24-hour urinary output.
Same for cows.
And that's a little bit more difficult to do, particularly with cows. Might be a little easier for it's a lot more difficult with cows.
So a lot of things you believe the research that's out there, and you have to do some extrapolation. So you can look at the chemistry, which is beyond me, but is the chemistry sound, and then go from there.
Maria, sharpen your elbows. Come on in. What do you got?
No, I was thinking about that and how to track what's the best biomarker, right, that we need to follow to understand if the enzyme is working, because we understand if that enzyme is working well, so it has a proper level in the blood, means that all the minerals that are involved as a cofactor of this enzyme are working well. So this should give us some kind of good idea and information, but this is not applied, right? I think this is the most difficult thing. This is definitely not applied, and if we want to know better, it will need we will need to make a huge investment, and the environment is always changing. So the more we study and we have our R&D facility, we see that we really need to trust our mineral provider, right? We really need to trust that we have the chemical part covered, so the nutritionist can be sure that he doesn't need to be worried with minerals, right? That we have the minerals covered, because it's very difficult to have this comparison when we are talking on field extrapolation. And Stephen, something that I would like you to share with the guys here, you were talking about the interaction. I was here drinking my Brazilian coffee, and Scott was asking me about that, because not a good time for coffee, but for me, my Brazilian coffee is always a good time. And Stephen, you shared a very
Same
good
for my
tip.
Kentucky bourbon.
Or Ohio beer. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Except
if
Maria
this
and I
light
can
muggy,
drink
you
ours
never
in the car.
know. Sorry?
Maria and I can drink our drinks in the car. You guys can't. So
It's true.
Correct. We can drive. But Stephen, you shared a very good tip about interaction. Can you repeat that here for our friends on the podcast, that we should never get iron with coffee? Is that correct?
Right. So iron in green and black teas, not so much the herbal teas, but green and black teas, have polyphenolic compounds in there that inhibit the absorption of iron in human nutrition. So if you want to take your iron supplement and get the maximum utilization of the iron supplement, take it with a glass of orange juice or lemonade, and that's a much better you have much better absorption of that. Ascorbic acid is a known promoter of iron absorption, so take it with your vitamin C or your orange juice or something like that, or even just a high protein meal. That'll help out as well. But yeah, take it with your coffee or your tea. You're going to inhibit the absorption of that iron.
Yeah.
But going back to your thing, Maria, it's not so easy just to have a standard biomarker. I mean, every single mineral has its own biomarker. The biomarker that is accepted for zinc might be different than copper, which is different than iron. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to do some of that research. And some of the minerals we still haven't settled on what is the gold standard for the biomarker for that mineral. So it's
analyzing enzyme can vary a lot depending on the time of the day as well, right?
Yeah. To me, one reason we made great progress in selenium is because we have very sensitive biomarkers.
Yes.
Blood is a great measure of selenium, glutathione peroxidase, and a few others. Manganese, I studied manganese for 30 years. I have no idea how to evaluate bioavailability. None.
No.
Because nothing changes. You can liver, you can change intake tenfold. Liver concentrations might change 2 or 3%. You're never going to find these differences. Zinc is hard. There's a few, it's a little bit better, but not great. Copper, we have liver. But there's great question as to what the proper liver copper should be. We know it's sensitive to changes in intake, but what's the right amount? We have ranges, and that range is becoming questioned a little bit, especially at the high end. So this biomarker thing is, I wish it would make life of mineral researchers a whole lot easier if we had good, accepted biomarkers for all these. It is so hard.
And I know something. Sorry, Scott. Can I ask another thing here, just to get things a little bit more complicated about minerals in raw material? Right? We don't know how much mineral we have in our forages. This can vary a lot. Do you have anything, Bill, on that side to understand better mineral composition? Because it's very hard to talk about a suggestion on a good level of minerals if we don't understand what the cows are eating. And
I'm going to have to limit it to North American forages because that's where we have the most database. We have huge databases, so I don't know if the distribution is the same in other countries. But these trace minerals in general in forages are not as variable as people think. They have a very non-normal distribution. These huge, long tails of the median might be 6 parts per million copper, but you're going to get some with 20 and 30 parts per million. Most of those appear to be outliers, bad contamination, soil contamination, so on. So on trace minerals, I'm a big fan on forages to use averages. And even a book average is probably better than a farm-specific 1 or 2 samples. And we've done quite a bit of simulation with copper, zinc, and manganese is the only 3 we've looked at. And if you use the median from a good database for corn silage or alfalfa or so on, use the median, you're probably less likely to be wrong than if you use an individual 1 or 2 spot samples from a farm. So you shouldn't don't put in zeros. We know there's more than zeros. I encourage nutritionists to start generating their own database. They're going to be sampling these feeds in an area. Get a good average copper for corn silage or alfalfa or whatever, and use the average. Don't ever rely on a single point estimate on trace minerals from forages. The chance of you being very wrong is higher than using a book. So, but don't do zeros. Too many nutritionists say, well, I don't trust the numbers, so I'm going to use 0. And I can guarantee 0 is wrong. That I can guarantee it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill. I mean, the averages where we've got good data, I think there might be less data outside the U.S., particularly in some of the areas where some of the growing areas are not ideal growing areas like we have in the Midwest, which is an ideal growing area for some of these forages. There might be a little bit more variability, and you might see. And maybe you can comment to this, Bill. I've read some literature, and this is more on the human nutrition side, particularly for some of the ultra trace minerals like selenium, that there might be a little bit more variability in selenium depending upon where that forage is grown, what selenium's in the soil.
Yeah, selenium is one exception where I just accept in certain areas of the Dakotas, maybe Montana, where they have high selenium soils. That's one where I do just put 0 in. But the copper, manganese, zinc, those I put in at least an average. But yeah, selenium, and the regulations are such you can assume 0. So the regulations allow supplemental, not total. So.
And maybe the other thing I'd add to this too, Maria, is that when we start looking at trace minerals, you have an optimal range for those trace minerals. You don't have just a single point where it's good. You've got a range there where the animal's going to be somewhat adaptable to what's coming in. So that can kind of account for whatever minute variations there are within the local forages. That we have that going for us. Some minerals that optimal area is a little narrower, like with selenium, but with things like zinc and copper, those have fairly good ranges and animals are pretty adaptable to them. You're not going to cause a problem one way or the other.
Ruminants evolved at the 3 or 4 months of the year. They barely lived because the nutrition was so poor. Yeah. And they're designed to load up the liver with trace minerals. When times are good and when times are bad, they mobilize them. So, you don't have to be perfect every day. You probably don't have to be perfect every week on trace minerals. Animals are fluid. They're adaptable. They can handle deficiencies. And I think that's off the topic a little bit. One of the problems we have with trace mineral research is our dairy cows today are in such good status. It may take me 3 months of feeding a deficient diet before I ever can have any response to a diet. So, it's the liver, the cow is designed to handle short-term deficiencies, dietary deficiencies.
Bill, kind of related to that, do you think we're overfeeding trace minerals today?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That was quick.
I've seen so many diets in my life, and I pay attention to trace minerals and vitamins. Vitamins are probably worse than trace minerals. It's gotten better. There's some manganese is a non-issue. I think the requirement is too low, and you should be probably 2 times NASEM to cover that. Zinc is probably also a little low in NASEM if you look at all the data. So I don't have an issue with that being 2 times NASEM or there. If you start getting 3 and 4 times, you have to start questioning that. Copper is one that we over-supplemented a lot. That's coming back. And that is probably when you talk about toxicity, there's different ways to express it. One is in milligrams or micrograms per day, which is useful. But I usually, when I taught class, I'd express toxicity relative to requirement. In other words, if you fed 5 times requirement, was it toxic? And if you express it that way, copper is the most toxic trace mineral we feed relative to the requirement. You can get in trouble with 2.5 times requirement on copper. Requirement's probably 10 to 15 parts per million. We used to see 30s. And now I see, and I don't see as many diets as I used to, but now I do see a lot of dietary coppers in the mid-teens parts per million. That's where they should be. I don't see 30s anymore. So it's helped. Selenium, again, for a lactating cow, the 0.3 or 0.4 when you add in basal is probably good enough for almost all lactating cows. We don't need to feed 0.6 or 0.7. Dry cows, you can make an argument the regulation is too low. And the regulation is on a concentration basis. Requirements are on a mass basis. Dry cows eat half as much feed as a lactating cow. The selenium needs aren't that much different between a lactating cow and a dry cow. So you could make an argument. I can't tell you to do this because it's against the law, but they're higher than regulation in dry cows biologically can be you can come up with a justification of that. I can't, again, it's illegal, so I won't say do it, but there's no reason to be 2 or 3 times NASEM. You could argue NASEM isn't perfect. It isn't, but there's no reason to be 2 and 3 times higher than NASEM for any of these things.
I've recently been having email conversation with a consulting nutritionist. And so this question is a little bit related. Bill, maybe you've covered some of it, but he said, I think people are confused about the direction in the NASEM about feeding for the average or the upper end of the needs for a group and the difference between a requirement and a recommended level. Can you talk to that?
When NASEM, when we sat down and did this, if you're familiar at all with the human, I can't even think of the name of it now, for the human nutrition guidelines.
Yeah, the DRI.
The DRI and then the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. The recommended daily allowance builds in a safety factor. Mm-hmm. And it's theoretically based on variability in the population. That some of this data, we don't have any data on variability, but that's the theory. And so what we did in NASEM, we have no idea what the variability in the copper requirement is among cattle. We have no idea. We might have an idea of how variable the copper concentration in milk is, but that's only part of the requirement. So what we did was we said, okay, how variable is if I have a cow if I have 10 cows that are producing the same amount of milk, they weigh the same, everything's about the same, how variable is metabolism? And so we looked at fasting heat production as a measure of metabolism. And the variation in that was the coefficient of variation is about 10%. And so if you if you want to feed 95% of the population, it's 2 standard deviations. And so that's 20. 2 times the CV is 95%. So in there, we'd say for most nutrients, if you'd feed 20% above NASEM, you're accounting for variability. So if I have a group that needs, I'm making this number up, needs 20 milligrams of copper a day, which they need a lot more, but if they need 20, you should be feeding 24 or so a day to that. You should average 24 milligrams a day. So that safety factor, that recommendation, is trying to account for normal variation. It doesn't account for, like what Steve was talking, antagonism, stress, none of that. It's just the normal variation with what we'd expect within a pen of cows.
Yep. It's all analytical chemistry.
Yeah. And like I said, then when I taught, I say you start with NASEM, you tack on 20%. You look at antagonism, and then you adjust for if you have a lot of sulfur in the water, a lot of sulfur in the feed, sulfates, you kick it up again. And you keep looking at these adjustments. And you can get it up to, again, maybe for copper up to 1.8 times NASEM. And that's under very bad conditions. But that's about as high as I ever could justify on when you take all this stuff into account. But you should definitely feed above NASEM. NASEM, even if it was perfect, only feeds the average cow. It doesn't feed cows that have higher than average requirements.
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb here, but in the interest of transparency, Bill, can you kind of give us your opinions and thoughts on organic trace minerals, and how do you recommend feeding them in the field?
That's a question when the phone rang. That's a question I hated to get because, I like to base my opinions on data.
Right.
And again, it's so hard because we don't have good measurements. So it's really hard to say. I always say buy it from a reputable company. That's number one, no matter what you're buying. And then I look and say, some of the best nutritional advice still is eat a variety of sources of nutrients in moderation. I still think that's great nutritional advice. So I think a more than one source of a nutrient is good. So I am a fan of combinations, organics, and I used to be a fan, say, feed some inorganics and some organics. And people would ask what combination. I say, I have no idea. Punt 50-50 because I don't know what it is. But with all this data on the negative effects of sulfates on fiber digestion, I've gone away from that. Now I say let's do half hydroxy, half good quality organics. But I like combinations. And again, I can't defend 50-50. I don't know. But I do like combinations better than a single source of the supplement.
All right. Makes sense. Stephen, anything for Bill? Bill, anything for Stephen?
So, yeah, I got a question for you, Bill. So, knowing that the hydroxys are insoluble, what about other insoluble minerals serving as the inorganics, such as carbonates?
Could you say that again? I missed what you said.
Okay. So, knowing that the hydroxychlorides are insoluble, so solubility is not a factor here.
Yeah.
What about other insoluble sources for the inorganic portion of the diet, like oxides or carbonates?
Yeah, the standard form of copper oxide is basically inert, so that one's out. There is another, and I don't know my chemistry enough. There is another copper oxide with a different oxidation state that looks to be okay. So I think something like that would be a zinc oxide might be a good blend with organic zinc. I don't know that much about the carbonate, so I clearly not the chlorides or the sulfates. Yeah. Those are those dissociate as well. I'd stay away from the standard copper oxide. I wish I knew what the definition of that standard was, but
right,
it's the one we used to feed that did nothing. But so that may be an approach too, is these less soluble inorganics. But you want something that won't interact with the rumen bacteria to kill them, and then also it reduces antagonism. And I don't know, you might know the answer to this, is say with copper, copper is again a bad one, but is the oxides less likely to be antagonized than the sulfates?
So yes and no. So no, because of the limited solubility, it's going to take a little bit longer to separate the anion from the cation. But once they do get separated, and they will get separated, then they're going to be no different than the sulfates. The sulfates will just react much quicker with the antagonists. Okay. I think the key thing you said there in your responses was, and we don't have as much of an issue in monogastrics. We still have the microbiome in monogastrics, but it's not as important, in my opinion, is with the rumen, is make sure that it doesn't kill off the microbiome. And if you get a high dose of zinc oxide in there, you might kill off the microbiome or negatively impact that microbiome as it becomes, because these oxides will hydrate to hydroxides, and then you got a big pH effect.
Kind of want to double down on something, Bill, you said, working with a good reputable company. There are a lot of good reputable organic trace mineral companies with good products, good companies, good people. And there's some you need to be aware of, right? And we'll not name names, but Stephen, I recall once we had a cheap source of material a customer was buying. We analyzed it, and it was just basically a blend of protein and mineral. And so I guess, I don't know if you want to comment to that, but the takeaway is, if it seems to be too good to be true, yeah, it probably is.
So, yeah, I agree. A lot of times you're going to, in a sense, get some of what you pay for when it comes to organic trace minerals. If you find a really, really cheap organic trace mineral or something that seems to be abnormally higher than others in terms of the mineral content. So let's just say, for example, let's just use zinc as an example. If you're getting an organic trace mineral that's, they say it's organic trace mineral, and you're getting up and they say, yeah, it could deliver 30-40% zinc content, that should be a enormous red flag that says you are not getting an organic trace mineral. A typical organic trace mineral in today's markets should be, again, using zinc as an example, a good one should be in the neighborhood of anywhere from that 10 to 20% range, because that's where the chemistries work out in terms of that. You can get some higher. Yes, you can get some higher. You can get some of the glycinates that might be a little bit higher, maybe up closer to 25-26%. But the chemistry is going to put an absolute maximal limit on the amount of mineral that can be in there and still have it be organically bound.
Yeah. So Stephen, you recently created a brand new product for Balchem that is higher in metal content compared to a lot of the competitors out there. Tell us, how did you do that? What is different about that product? And I know it took you a while, but you were able to get it there.
So when you're looking at organic trace minerals, you basically got two major components. You got your ligand, your protein, your amino acid. You have your metal. So the metals, it's easy to find good quality sources of metals, and what I mean by that is make sure that it's going to be low in contaminants. You don't want a lot of heavy metals present in there, because minerals are mined. They do come with heavy metals. So just make sure that, those heavy metals, you don't have excess in there. But the real difference is when you start looking at your ligand, getting good quality ligands. I mean, the amount of protein that is present in your ligand makes a big difference. The higher you can make that protein content, that means that you when you start calculating out your molar ratios, you're going to be able to have a higher mineral content because you got a higher protein content. You don't have a whole bunch of carbohydrate or other material in there that is really non-workable for formating the chelate. That's going to still be present in there and diluting out the mineral content. So it is a little bit of work to try to find those high protein contents and good quality proteins as well. That's going to deliver a good mix of both essential and non-essential amino acids. You can go with single amino acids. They're a lot easier to formulate with from a chemistry standpoint, because you don't have to deal with multiple molecular weights of your amino acids. But then I think you limit some of what we were talking about earlier about some of the effects and absorption pathways that might be beneficial when you have a multiple amino acid organically bound trace mineral.
Very well. Just a real quick commercial. That product is called Keysure Plus. All right. Thank you. Last commercial, I promise. All right. Any other big topics we need to cover, folks?
I do have one good about magnesium, if we can go back, because I do take magnesium as well, and I give to my dogs. So we do have different magnesium. So good benefits of magnesium for different species, right? In companion animals, we are seeing magnesium big trend for their benefits. But I would like to hear from you, Bill. How about organic magnesium instead of magnesium sulfate, so we can escape the sulfate problem?
Well, there's been almost no research with organic magnesium in ruminants. I think there's been one or two papers long ago, actually. Magnesium in ruminants is quite a bit different than non-ruminants. And one is, we know it has to be soluble to be absorbed. So, these organics and the absorption is in the rumen. It's the net absorption occurs in the rumen, not the intestine. So it has to be solubilized in the rumen. And then even if it's soluble, it's still only going to be maybe 35% absorbed at best, because there's so much antagonism, potassium and otherwise. So it has to be soluble, but even if it's soluble, you're still not going to have very good absorption, no matter what. It's just poor. And so the glycine, because it has to dissociate, I don't think it's going to be much less antagonized than magnesium sulfate. But again, the sulfate has the negative connotations of sulfur for lactating cows. So it may be better than the sulfate because of it doesn't have sulfate, but it's not going to be, I can't see it being that much more absorbable than sulfate or magnesium acetate, just because of all this antagonism. So it gets away from the sulfate. The problem with mag oxide is the variability. Good mag oxide is almost as good as magnesium sulfate, but you have to know what's good, and that's a big question. So the benefits of the organic magnesium may be it's consistent. It's always going to be this variable. It's going to have a solubility, and so the consistency is a big benefit of magnesium sulfate. But again, the sulfate ion is something we don't want in lactating cows. So it would have the benefits of consistency and not the problem with the sulfate counter ion.
All right, very well. Anything else, folks? All right. Well, then I want to announce a promotion. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I've been drinking my bourbon from a Real Science Exchange glass, and Bill is drinking from a Real Science Exchange beer stein. And so anybody that goes out and gives us a 5-star review and comments on Apple, the first 100 that does that and sends us a screenshot to anh.marketing@balchem.com, I'm going to send you off either your choice, bourbon glass or beer stein. So,
do you have a Mountain Dew glass?
No Mountain Dew, Stephen.
A coffee mug. We needed to, yeah.
That'll be next week.
Extend.
All right, very well. We'll call last call then. What I'd like to do is just kind of go around the table and have each of you kind of share what were some of the key takeaways that we ought to take from the conversation today. And Maria, as our very, very first co-host, I'd like to start with you.
Our last call question is sponsored by AminoSure XM Precision Release Methionine, the next generation in amino acid balancing. With AminoSure XM, you can save up to 5 cents per cow per day on your methionine investment. Try it today and receive an additional 2.5 cents per cow per day savings with Balchem's limited time rebate offer. Contact your Balchem representative to learn more.
I think, Scott, is a very good conversation because it's all about applied knowledge, right? Not only to be based on science, but to know how to apply that. And this is, I would say, our mission here in the industry. So this is my main takeaway, to know how to apply all the science that we have behind us.
Yep, great point. And Bill, we want to thank you for that. Why don't you kind of give us your key takeaways?
Well, trace mineral nutrition is complicated, but the bottom line is feed enough, but don't feed too much. And so NASEM isn't enough. You're going to be above that, a modest amount above that. Consider antagonist. Sulfur is probably the biggest one you have to worry about for all the metals. The benefits of the organics, high quality organics, I think, is consistency of availability. And again, I think there's a lot to be learned on effects of microbiome, ruminal and intestinal. So I think that when you start looking at all these other potential benefits, you can afford to not feed sulfates. I just have 10 years ago, I said sulfates are fine. I'm souring on them because of all these non-mineral effects we're seeing here. So,
all right, thank you for that, Bill. Stephen, as featured guest, you get the last word.
All right, so I agree with Bill. trace mineral nutrition is complicated. I think, utilizing good quality organic trace minerals and really emphasize that. Make sure you get good quality organic trace minerals from a reputable company. Particularly, I know it's particularly in trying economic times. It's very tempting to try to go with something a little bit cheaper, but sticking with those reputable companies will pay off dividends in the long run. So, good organic trace mineral, can help with some of those antagonistic effects, limiting some of those antagonistic effects, and help provide the mineral nutrition that the animals need.
All right. Thank you, Steve and Bill. You guys have been great guests. Appreciate your expertise. Maria, great co-host. We'll have you back, and welcome to Balchem. To our loyal audience out there, thank you as always for coming along with us on this journey. We hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun, and I hope to see you next time here at Real Science Exchange, where it's always happy hour and you're always among friends. Cheers.
Cheers.
We'd love to hear your comments or ideas for topics and guests, so please reach out via email at anh.marketing@balchem.com with any suggestions, and we'll work hard to add them to the schedule. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating on your way out. You can request your Real Science Exchange t-shirt in just a few easy steps. Just like or subscribe to the Real Science Exchange and send us a screenshot along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@balchem.com. Balchem's Real Science Lecture Series of webinars takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, with the top research and nutrition topics that will impact your business. We also include small ruminant, monogastric, and companion animal-focused topics throughout the year. Visit balchem.com/realscience to see the upcoming topics and to register for future webinars. You can also access past webinars and search for the topics most important to you.